Welcome to episode 279 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak encouragement into the hearts of educators and get you informed and energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm sharing a sneak peek at our 40-hour Teacher Workweek online summit that's happening this summer, where K-12 teachers share their favorite time-saving tips and tricks. Visit truthforteachers.com for an easy-to-read, easy-to-share version of this podcast episode. With the way demands on educators have increased and become more complex over recent years, you might be wondering if you'll ever get some semblance of a reasonable, sustainable workload. Our 40-hour Teacher Workweek full-year program kicks off just once a year, each summer, and we're preparing to welcome our next cohort of teachers. Go to 40htw.com to learn more about how you can do a great job for kids without working endlessly on nights and weekends. That's 40htw.com. Let your principal know about the 40-hour leadership program to help administrators streamline too, and see if you can use school funding, grant money, or even donors choose to cover costs. More info is available at 40htw.com. So the 40-hour program was first created in 2015. It's really hard for me to believe now that we are in our 8th year. We made a total update to the entire set of materials in 2020, and we have now had tens of thousands of teachers complete the course. I think we're over 50,000 at this point. And we've had lots of different personality types, lots of different teaching contexts represented within our membership. And so the amount of new ideas that would spring out a 40-hour was inevitable. And I have always been so impressed by the tweaks, the offshoots, the extensions, and the transformations that teachers have made as they have taken my ideas and just really made them their own and personalized them. And now I finally have an awesome way to feature these teachers and share their phenomenal work. The first 40-hour Teacher Workweek online summit is in the works. I am so excited. You are going to hear some sneak peeks from those presentations today. So you'll actually get to hear some really great time-saving tips. So this event is entirely online. It is completely free, and it is beneficial for all K-12 teachers. So you can join us live for free Monday, July 10th and Tuesday, July 11th. Sessions will be running every half hour from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. There are 30 plus presentations and roundtable discussions included, and I will be giving the opening and closing keynotes. Other than me, though, in terms of the actual session presenters, all of them are current K-12 classroom teachers and 40-hour members. The best part about this event, I think, is that, well, other than the fact that it's free, right? It's available to everyone, is the fact that the sessions are just 15 to 20 minutes long. I've been going to conferences and attending online events for many years, and I have just seen the way that all of our attention spans have really shortened, and how sometimes when sessions are longer, it creates a lot of filler, fluff. We've got icebreakers. In some conferences, there's a lot of pitches where people are promoting their own products, and I didn't want to have any of that. I just wanted to have teachers sharing their best time-saving ideas and really quick, actionable sessions. So I put the invitation out there to 40-hour members and asked them to fill out the application. These are paid presenters, by the way. I don't ever ask teachers to do any labor for free. And we had a fantastic response. And I gave them as much creative space as I possibly could. I was like, I don't want to standardize this. I don't want to make you fit into a box of what you think it is that I want. I don't want this to all look the same. I want this to really reflect your personality and what works for you. And I want it to be simple for you. And I didn't know what would happen when I did that, but I was absolutely blown away. It was so much better than if I had said everyone needs to submit slides and, whatever. So some of the presenters will take you on a video tour of their classroom. So they walk around to the different areas and show you how they organize things and how they manage their classroom routines. Some of them are screen sharing. They're doing tutorials about how they organize their digital files, how they save links, how they manage assessment, how they plan lessons. So they're actually showing you on the screen how they use Google Calendar or whatever the tool is to stay organized. So those are super cool. Then we have others who are just giving a fast rundown of all their best time-saving tips. So they are just whipping through the ideas and showing you pictures or just talking about exactly what it is that they do. So there's just some really, really cool stuff there. We also have a presenter who videoed her students playing learning games that she had used. And these are games that she uses over and over, so she doesn't have to plan so many different activities. She teaches that game to her kids once, and then they use it for a variety of skills. So she's shown actually how she did that. And she made a version for elementary and for secondary because she's taught both. So there's just so much cool stuff there. It's so much better than I could have ever imagined. And I wanted to share some of them with you in advance of the actual summit. So figuring out which ones to feature here on the podcast was really hard to do because, first of all, there were so many awesome tips that I wanted to share, but also for a lot of them, you need the visuals. It's just not going to make as much sense in audio. So what I'm featuring here are just a very small sampling of all the awesomeness that is to come on July 10th and 11th. So if you want to join us for the summit, you can just Google 40-Hour Teacher Workweek Online Summit. You can click the link in the show notes, or you can go to join.40htw.com/summit, and you can sign up for free. We are also making the recordings available for purchase. So if you want to rewatch, if you can't attend all the sessions, if you're in a time zone that is across the globe somewhere, and this is the middle of the night for you, I'm so sorry. By running it from 9 to 5, that hits a convenient time slot for most people, at least for part of it. But we do have the recordings available for purchase. That's discounted to $19 until the event starts. So if you think that you might want that, along with the transcripts, we have summaries, note-taking guides, all kinds of other great bonuses, including with that recordings purchase, if you want to, but you don't have to. It's a free event. So let's dive in here with the first excerpt. Bailey Onderich is presenting a session called You Don't Have to Perform: Lesson Structures to Increase Student Autonomy. And she's talking about this pressure that teachers feel to always be on, to be at the front of the classroom, to be managing everything, and how really exhausting it is. She is sharing how you can diversify your lesson structures and increase autonomy in your students based on the findings of her own practitioner research study. So she's sharing 4 innovative lesson structures that will really help with this. And I'm going to let you listen on one of them here now, which is learning contracts.
So the way a learning contract works is it is a plan that the student makes for how they will learn about something that they are excited to learn about. I love doing this type of lesson structure after students have filled out a KWL chart. Because once they've already marked what they know, what they want to know about a topic, and then what they learn after something like a guided learning lesson, there are always unanswered questions in that want to know column. Because maybe my video or my guest speaker didn't address exactly what they're interested in. So the purpose of a learning contract is to give the student the opportunity to investigate that and to prepare class time in order to do so. The way that this looks in my classroom is I have a form learning contract, which I'll make sure is included in your materials, where students say what it is that they want to learn, how they're going to learn about it, and what sources they're going to use. Those sources could be low tech, like books, magazines, even people that they have access to, maybe outside of school time or even within the school. Or in the state of Utah, we have a resource called Utah's Online Library. That's kind of a curated research database for students to use in K-12 schools. So that's my big go-to. And then students decide which of those resources they'll use in order to learn what it is that they want to learn. This is really a difficult research skill for my upper elementary school kids. They have to learn some grit through this process. So at first, it's really tricky, and it's very unfortunate to them when they realize that sometimes the information that they're looking for isn't easily accessible. So it's a great activity, especially at an end of unit, for students to learn something that they were hoping to learn and didn't, and also to teach grit and research skills, especially with with reading and writing. I love this lesson structure, again, at the end of a unit, and it's definitely one that gets better with time toward the end of a school year. So I would use this periodically throughout the school year to help students with their language arts, with their research skills. And I would use it anytime at the end of a unit when I know that there are questions that students have that I haven't answered yet.
Here's a quick and easy tip from Maggie Whitaker. She's a 7th grade U.S. Studies and 21st Century Communication teacher in Minnesota. Her session is titled, How I Learned to Finally Invest in Myself, and How You Can Too.
Wanting to dig deeper into productivity led me to a time management expert named Laura Vanderkam. Like Angela, Laura's work goes beyond efficiency tips and focuses on ensuring that we spend our time on the things that truly matter most to us. One idea she encourages is to plan your upcoming week on Fridays. The reason being that our Fridays, specifically Friday afternoons, are arguably the least productive time of our entire week. I love this idea, and I love how she takes it a step further, encouraging us to make plans for 3 different buckets of life: career, relationships, and self. I use that template to plan the upcoming week, like thinking big picture, as well as daily. So thinking like, okay, it's a Monday evening, tomorrow's Tuesday. What's one thing I want to accomplish in regards to my career, in regards to relationships, in regards to like my own self for the next day? What does Tuesday look like in those 3 areas of life? It's a good reminder that all 3 warrant our time and attention.
Andrea Clark is currently a 5th grade teacher at Munich International School in Germany, and her session is called Co-Grading with a Colleague, a more enjoyable and manageable approach to assessment. Listen as she shares her struggles with grading and how sharing the workload with a colleague has helped.
I have been working with the IB grading system for 4 years, so I have certainly had time to figure out a way to stay on top of my grading. But no, I basically just figured out a way to avoid it as much as possible and then frantically get it done as quickly as possible, punishing myself in the process and delaying giving students back the feedback they want and need. Last year, I took my first steps toward tackling this problem. As a longtime listener of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers podcast and a graduate member of the 40-hour Teacher Workweek Club, I have long been using many of her strategies for making teaching and all of the tasks associated with teaching, like grading, more efficient and effective. I realized that I didn't need to grade everything all in one sitting. I just needed to get it done as quickly as possible. I rarely had time to sit down and grade everything all at once anyway, so waiting for that magical period of time where I would have no interruptions was never going to happen. I figured if I just graded one thing a day, eventually I would get them all done. It could take a long time, but at least I would be slowly chipping away at the stack. And I can usually get more than one done in a day, but I could always do at least one. And it worked. I felt better about grading. I got grading done more quickly, and I didn't feel guilty or stressed by the process. This year, I continued with that process and have added a new dimension to make it even more efficient and enjoyable. I couldn't have done this last year since I wasn't on a team of teachers. This year, I work with 4 other 5th grade teachers, and at least one of them shares my frustration and dread of grading. So we figured out a plan together, co-grading with a colleague. In short, every time we have a shared planning period, which is several times a week, we sit together in the same room and grade something. How does this work for us? Well, one of us will pop our head into the other's classroom and say, "Do you want to grade those math projects during 3rd period today?" Or, "When do you have time to grade those essays today?" And the other says, yes, I do. Or, "How about 4th period?" Then we pick a room to work in, bring our stuff to grade, sit down, and get started. We usually work on the same assignment, but that's not a requirement. It can make moderating each other's grading easier if we are both on the same assignment. Hey, I gave this student this grade. Would you give this student the same grade? But it just requires a little code switching to move between assignments if we're not working on the same assignment. Since we teach the same subjects and give the same assessments, we both know what all of the assignments are. Our rule is always to grade at least one thing, and sometimes it's one thing between the two of us. If we only have 5 or 10 minutes together, then we'll use that time to grade one thing and be done. It feels manageable to grade one thing together, and we can check it off the list quickly, and we can feel like we are moving in the right direction. We're never upset that it was only one thing. Hey, it's one more thing graded than we had done 5 minutes ago. If it's a particularly hard assignment to grade, we grade each student's assignment together. Sure, it can take twice as long, but we feel more confident with the grades that we are giving since we have to come to some sort of agreement. And it usually doesn't take twice as long since we get in a rhythm and start to know what to look for. This strategy is also effective when we are not motivated to grade. We can drag each other through the process and then actually feel better since we did get something accomplished. Sometimes we talk about a lot of the students' work and sometimes we don't. Some assignments are more straightforward to grade than others. She's better with nuances in grading English assignments, and I'm better with nuances in grading math assignments. Sometimes we even get to listen to music. There have been many benefits so far for us, including we're holding each other accountable. Sure, I can sit in her room and do something else. But when she proclaims that she's graded 4 lab reports, I have to sheepishly admit that I wasn't actually grading at all, and I'm just too competitive to let her win like that. We can also help each other make sure that we don't fall too far behind with the grading. If one of us is almost done, it motivates the other to catch up. We are checking each other's grading biases. Since we're in the same room, if there's a response that she wants a second opinion on, we can have the other one take a look at it. This allows us to make sure we aren't giving too high or too low marks to students that we know really well. Having a second, more objective perspective is helpful in moderating our own biases. We can reflect on the assignment together. If the rubric is frustrating or the assignment didn't go the way that we wanted, or our students are really struggling with a certain question, we can make corrections on it going forward and improve the rubric for next time. We can make the assignments better by grading them together. If something goes wrong with my class's assignment, it might be me or my students. But if it also went wrong with her class, it's probably the assignment. And finally, we get to spend time together on a regular basis. Teaching can be incredibly isolating, even on a team. So it's nice to get to check in with each other and make sure the other one is doing okay. It makes us better teachers, better teammates, and happier people.
Next up is Amanda Lay, a middle school ELA teacher who is presenting on how to use project-based learning, or PBL, and alternative assessment methods to save time. Here she is talking about what to grade and how to grade it.
We really want to focus on authentic means of assessment, such as performance-based tasks, portfolios, and projects. So you can see how project-based learning and alternative assessment really align together. But how does this all tie back to the 40-hour teacher work week? Well, at the top, I said that this was one of my biggest takeaways, and it is one of the main contributors to avoiding burnout for myself. In the first few years as an ELA teacher, I spent countless hours grading student essays, writing meticulous comments only for students to receive their work back, look for the final grade, and completely ignore all of the other feedback I had given them. And so when I was going through the 40-hour program in the 2021 cohort, the November core concepts really stuck out to me because November is all about grading and assessment. So I've taken a couple of the core concepts from November to sort of unpack with you today and align with what I'm talking about. The first core concept that I'm going to speak on is that the 40-hour teacher work week November concepts tell us we should be giving fewer assignments. Now, a lot of ELA teachers say that's easier said than done, but as we look at some project-based learning and alternative assessment examples, you're going to see how it allows for you to assign fewer assignments to your students, and you're able to focus on meaningful and authentic learning experiences for your students. You're no longer giving busy work, and you're no longer spending countless hours grading and giving feedback. That ties into our second core concept that we're going to look at. As a teacher, particularly a literacy teacher, you should only grade an assignment if it is a true and important measure of what students can do. And I loved this quote about alternative assessment because it rings very true to me as someone who has used this in their classroom. And it really is wonderful for all kids because it allows you, the teacher, to truly understand what students are capable of as learners in your classroom. It's very hard for students to BS their way through an alternative assessment or a project-based learning project. And there's not a lot of ways for students to cheat on these assessments, or at least it becomes a lot more difficult for them to do so. So this becomes a really true assessment of what your students are able to do.
Next, we have Catherine Pilak. She teaches high school in Indiana, and her session is called Bringing More Joy to the Classroom Through Adapted Games, Intentional Timers, and the Modern Classroom Project. She had asked me for guidance on which of these topics to focus her presentation on, and I recommended she cover all three because I think they're so powerful. Anything that prevents burnout and makes teaching and learning more enjoyable is super important to share. So listen as Catherine shares a practice that has helped her students communicate more effectively and participate more in class.
After the pandemic, I recognized that there was more and more need for students to come together, shake off a lot of the social anxieties, be able to communicate with one another again on a low risk level. And so I started actually with what I called Fun Fridays. And we would use Fridays to play some games to build trust, to build eye contact, to build those elusive speaking and listening skills, and to help bridge some of that digital distance. This includes student to student and also student to teacher. I don't know if you were teaching during and after the pandemic, but certainly I noticed a sharp contrast to students' desire to talk to one another and even for us to trust that social and emotional distance. I have also used these game moments as a way to build creativity and to produce that critical thinking that especially colleges are looking for beyond the formulaic foundational skills. I want to encourage my students to think more critically and creatively. And it's also a low risk way to work on skill transfer. And I'll be more specific about all of those as we move through here. Lastly, the reason I switched from Fun Friday to Fun Day Monday is I needed a way for me to get excited about coming to school on Monday morning. And I thought the same was probably true of my teenagers. And so we switched it to Fun Day Monday. It's a nice, easy warm-up way to begin the week. So I'll talk a little bit more about what I do. I have lots of different games that I have purchased as well as invented, and then I have modified. And then I use a Fun Day Monday for just generic team building, and that's probably what I have seen the most benefit from. I think in part because the kids do really enjoy talking to each other as much as they don't want to show it. I have a lot of students who come in and just want to get on their phones and ignore everyone else, and this forces them into conversation, and almost always there are smiles all around, okay, even from the students who aren't generally smilers. So I have been quite pleased with that. I have students who I typically wouldn't engage in conversation with as intentionally, if that makes sense. And this produces a fun way for me to interact with them on a level that's not academic, on a level that's not disciplinary. It also encourages the mixing of groups and getting outside of their comfort zones. I shake the groups up all the time, and they don't have to come together with a very academic, daunting task with people they don't really know or like. They can play Jenga, and it feels a lot more low risk. A couple other games I mentioned here. The first one is actually a card game called Quiddler, and I have tried to modify that to work alongside the game Left, Right, Center. And again, directions for that at the end of this presentation. I also use the game Rhyme Out and Splurt, and those are just fun team building, usually funny games that can be done in 3 to 5 minutes. Sometimes I will have my bell or my clock watcher set a timer for 5 minutes, and we see what we can do in those 5 minutes, and then we move on with our content. But after those 5 minutes, people are smiling, people have let down their guard, and I am in a much better mood. And I guess I want to go back to this slide on why games. At the end of the day, students are communicating more. They have more familiarity and vulnerability with one another if they have been playing these kinds of games. It's been a nice way to watch them build relationships with each other, but also with me, right? So I'm wandering around and I'm playing sometimes with them. We're all laughing together. It does build creativity. It forces the critical thinking, especially those argumentative debate style games. It more than anything helps us laugh. And I think a lot of times our world gets so serious and our students are expected to do so much. And it's just a fun way to let down our guard and be human.
We also have Jessica Peak, a 6th grade earth science teacher in Idaho, and she's sharing her 3 biggest time-saving tips for the secondary classroom. Her session talks about grading by response category and hyperlinked planning documents. She also covers classroom jobs. So here's an excerpt of her ideas about that.
As a secondary teacher, I've always been a little bit apprehensive about implementing class jobs. It felt a little bit contrived, like I would be creating jobs for the sake of creating jobs. But then in the pandemic, I was just overloaded. I had half my kids in class, half my kids at home. Like the little things you have to do, like multiplied by 10, it felt like. So I had to start figuring out, okay, how can I share the burden with my students? And I started asking myself 3 questions to help identify my jobs. The first one was, what necessary tasks do I have a hard time remembering to do? Second, what necessary tasks do I just hate doing? And finally, is there anything my students would enjoy doing? Like I don't mind doing it, but my students could absolutely do it and they would love it. That brought forth this list of jobs. My attendance manager, my whiteboard manager, they take over things I forget to do. After 12 years, I still cannot remember to do my attendance. Also, I have a very hard time remembering to write my learning target and agenda on the whiteboard. So these 2 managers take care of those things I forget. Next, my plant manager and my graded paper managers take care of things I hate doing. I hate watering plants and passing back papers. And I don't have to do them anymore. And then finally, some things my students like doing. I do a raffle every Friday. I realized my students would love to pull the names and announce them. I also had my students create a job. It's called the subsistent. And this is a person who helps decipher my lesson plan for a substitute and answer any questions they might have. And then finally, I just have a substitute that takes over any miscellaneous jobs or any jobs for folks who are absent. I choose students in one of 3 ways. The first way is an application. It's just a form where I have a description of my jobs. They pick their first choice, their second choice if they have one, and then why they would be good at those jobs. And then I choose based on these applications. Now this fills about 80% of my jobs. For the jobs I don't fill, first I just ask for volunteers. So the day that I announce who has what job, I'll just say, hey, we have a graded paper manager position open. Is anyone interested? And that usually fills about 95% of my jobs. But often, over all my classes, I have one position that stays open. If it's not like a necessary position, I'll just leave it open. But if it's my attendance manager, who I rely on desperately, then I will just personally ask a student, and inevitably, they'll do it for me. And then once I have all my people, I put them in one of these chart things with flashcards inside. And I have this in the back of my room, and I write big enough that I can see their names so that anytime I need help throughout a class period, I know who to call on. And there's just a lot, when you're in secondary, that's a lot of kids with a lot of jobs, and it's nice to keep it straight with like a big board in your room. Now, I'd like to go into a little more detail on 3 of my jobs that I found especially helpful, hopefully to give you like a visual of how you might implement this in your class if you're interested. So first, my attendance manager. What I do is I have a little tray at the edge of my desk with a binder that has seating charts for all my classes. When my attendance manager enters class, they wait for everyone to come in, and then they go to the seating chart, and any desk that is empty, they just put an A on. There's no sensitive information. It's just a seating chart with first and last name. And then when I have a chance, I grab the folder and I enter the attendance into PowerSchool. It just takes the load off, and it's nice. Okay, then I have my whiteboard manager. So there's already a requirement at my school to post your daily agenda. And so I just kind of beefed that up. So I have my daily agenda channel, and we use Microsoft Teams. And I just put in my learning target and my agenda. These are 2 things that we're required to put on our whiteboard. So I do one requirement, and then my student does the other requirement. So she just comes in first thing in the morning, opens up to the daily agenda that I posted the day before, and then she copies down the learning target to the whiteboard and the agenda to the whiteboard. I don't have to remember to do it because Ella remembers every single day. And then finally, my graded paper managers. So I have a spot in my room where I have all of my graded papers. It's just a tray on a counter. And when my graded paper managers finish assignments early, they just check the bin, and then if there's anything in it, they'll go pass out those papers for me. Additionally, if I just have a big stack that needs to be handed out immediately, I usually assign 3 graded paper managers. So I split the pile up among those 3, and I get my papers handed back in 3 minutes or less.
Jana Sucre Fortune teaches upper elementary in the Republic of Panama. Her session is called Save Time with Selective Grading, Batch Planning, and Classroom Jobs That Matter. Listen in as Jana talks about getting ahead in her lesson planning by batching her tasks.
At the beginning of school this year, and unfortunately for the last 9 years before, I was making lesson plans 1 week at a time. Sunday nights would often end up in a panic because I still didn't know what I was doing the next morning. Now, thanks to batch planning, I know what I'm doing a month ahead, or a unit ahead, or even a quarter ahead even. That means that I have more time to focus on the selective grading. It means I have more time to focus on my children. It means I have more time to focus on my husband. It means I have more time to spend with my parents on the weekends. It means no more Sunday night panic. Batch planning has been one of the greatest tools I've learned. It takes a long time at the very beginning. Remember that, okay? You're taking 1 or 2 long sessions to plan ahead for a long period of time so that you don't have to think about it each week.
Sawyer Henderson is an English teacher in Georgia whose session is called 5 Strategies to Streamline Your Workload, Boost Your Confidence, and Get More Done in the High School Classroom. He's talking about batching as well, but not specifically for lesson plans. Sawyer shares how to batch the tasks on your own to-do list.
A key cornerstone of the 40-hour workweek is creating effective to-do lists. However, this is a strategy that I found myself having to come back to every now and then to make sure I was making the most effective to-do lists I could. This is an example of the current system I use now. When I have to do a task, I mentally go through the following questions. I ask myself, is this task batchable? In other words, does it reoccur over and over, and should I consider allotting this to a particular day of the week? I think you will actually find that most tasks are batchable. I also ask, is this task immediate? Is this something that has to get done the same day or the next day? If so, it should go on the list ASAP on a particular day of the week. Or is this task something I could do later this week? These are tasks that may be allotted to a particular day, but it could be moved to a later section on your to-do list and may not be assigned to a particular day of the week. The same is true for later this month or long-term tasks. These tasks could either be put on your later section of your to-do list, or you may consider having a completely separate section for times in the year when you could accomplish them, such as in-service days, professional learning days, weird schedules, etc. So let's go through some examples together, and this is just the mental process I do for each type of task. Note that many of these come already from Angela's 40-hour materials. The first is RTI data, or really any data collection. Living in Georgia, many educators have to collect data for RTI, or our response to intervention, for students who are struggling behaviorally or academically. But even if you don't have to follow RTI, chances are you have to log some sort of data. So RTI data I would consider to be batchable. Picking one day a week to do this will make it easier to remember and more time efficient. The same goes for IEP data or 504 data. Batching these tasks on a particular day, like a Monday or a Tuesday, will save you time in the long run, and it helps make sure it gets done. Copies. I've actually found that making copies for the upcoming week all on the same day saves me so much time. So this task is batchable. That way I'm not wasting my planning or lunch every day to wait in line at the copier to make copies for the next day's lesson plans. On Mondays, I set aside my planning to run copies for the whole week, so I'm ready to go, and I don't have to waste my planning at a later time. Meetings. So meetings are an interesting task. They could either happen on a specific day, like you have a parent-teacher conference or a 504 meeting, but they may also be batchable. So for example, at our school, we have PLCs, or professional learning communities, once a week on Tuesdays. Since I am a department chair, I also get to attend our leadership meetings every Wednesday. Because I know my planning period will be taken up with these meetings every week, every Tuesday and every Wednesday, I go ahead and add them on the to-do list and think of other activities that could be easily added to the same days that don't require as much cognitive demand. So maybe I also set time to do extra copies on those days, or input grades into the computer system, or respond to some other emails or something like that. The next task is stakeholder communication. So these are kind of the same as meetings. So consider adding in your communication emails or follow-ups to days where you have meetings, since they may not be as cognitively demanding compared to an activity like grading or lesson planning, which might need your full focus without interruptions. These are also in that way batchable. So I put this one on here just as a reminder that there are certain items which have to be done maybe only once or are not batchable. So we have early releases typically on every final exam week at the end of each semester. So I'm not having to print these off each week. This may be a one and done type of task. But each time you have a task that has to get done, but only once, again, consider where would this task be best accomplished. For example, if you leave Thursdays open for grading during your planning period, and you need to have clear focus to do this, it would be unwise to put this task of printing off forms on the same day, because you'll probably lose focus when trying to do this. So it may not make sense to make it immediate. Maybe you schedule it for that next day, or on a day when you make copies, since you're already going to be going to the copier, or at a time when you have a meeting and will already be walking in the hallway heading to that meeting location.
If you enjoyed these excerpts from the 40-Hour Teacher Workweek Online Summit, sign up to join us for the full free live event happening July 10th and 11th. If you can't attend a session or you want to watch and rewatch at your convenience, we do have a Forever Access Pass, which will get you not only the recordings, but also note-taking guides, summaries of key ideas for each session, full transcripts, and more bonuses. It's just $19 right now, and the price will increase